This is our Preservative Talk radio show about to begin. And let's tune in. You're going to have to give me a few seconds to listen to the bumper music, but we're going to be talking about some parallel beast, this parallel machinery that is operating in sync in the same time that we've got a constitutional government happening. We've got this parallel world it's like the Blob, just sucking everybody up. And that's what we're going to address today. So give me a few seconds to tell the music to kick in, and we'll get right to our Preservative Talk radio broadcast and our radio stations, the Nooga Radio Network in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio, engaging these issues today, you know it, say it with me, on a constitutional basis, a biblical basis, the basis of right versus wrong. Today's topic is going to be, it's always as usual, it should be just a little bit strange for your entertainment to, let's say, stimulate your mind, your body, your soul, everything about you. We're going to be, let's say, a positive influence on your perspective today. And we're going to be talking about the blob, this parallel machinery, this parallel thing that's operating, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's rolling your way, trying to absorb you. And just imagine some Ralph Carmichael arranged scary music in the background as this thing rolls up to engulf you and absorb you into itself, its own entity. And it just wants to grow and grow and grow. We're going to talk about it today, and we're going to talk about how it contrasts to everything else that we talk about here. Yeah, the last time we spoke, we talked about the Tennessee Constitution. And I'm going to go through the Article 1, the Bill of Rights of the Tennessee Constitution, item by item, because each wonderful paragraph is so important. As I was talking about this last paragraph, which was the second paragraph in the Tennessee Bill of Rights, it talked about that the doctrine of non-resistance to arbitrary government is slavish. It's absurd, it's slavish, and it's destructive of the goodness and safety of mankind. So if that's the case, if we've got certain rules to protect our peace, our health, our safety, our happiness, and that's why we have a constitutional structure, you and me, we need to be ready to uphold that institution that is God's minister for our good. Okay, so we know that, but that's setting reset on our minds as we consider these things. So today I'm going to go for a macro look. There's some things that are happening globally, but it affects you daily. And you may not even know it. You may not realize that the things that you do with something communicated across the counter is actually generated by some committee somewhere out in the ether, a parallel government, a parallel blob has some really neat ideas, and they're consuming you as they roll along and grow. So what I'm going to, as I was considering the show today, I thought about these, it came to me. Whether I was divinely inspired, I have no idea. But there's this thing called special drawing rights. Special drawing, DRAWING, RIGHTS, special drawing rights. What are those? What are those? They're these things that to get money, if you're not in the United States or in China or UK, if you're not one of these major, there's 5 countries that have their own money system. And if you're not one of those big, massive powers, you're a small country, and you have, let's say you want to have a retirement fund for your people, or you want to pay for social welfare benefits, or you want to do whatever the governments need to do to perform a function, that they go to the International Monetary Fund to get money. Now, again, I'm going on macro. I'm showing you the big macro picture because we're going to come down to how this touches upon you in the local. But let's step back to the macro. Let's look at it. If we step back in our little drone and go up to about 1,000 feet, we're going to be able to see the battlefield here. So let's step back. We're going to look at these special drawing rights, and it's a thing that says, okay, country, you have points. You have points. You can borrow a certain amount of money. And when this thing started, it was 1969. It was actually these drawing rights were based on gold, a portion of a piece of gold and the currency value at the time in relationship to a piece of gold, an actual piece of substance, of something you can get out of the earth. Well, they changed that in 1973. So that's important, I guess, a little trivia to know. But it turned into something that was based on something other than gold. And that's why I'm going here today. It comes down to you in the narrow local when you discover that the substance of these special drawing rights is you. It is no longer the gold, it is you. So people's, let's say the monetary system and countries and their ability to borrow money out of this banking system has to do with resources, not their gold resources, not their titanium resources, not their coal resources, not their petroleum resources, though those are part of it. Ultimately, it comes down to the numbered heads. What is the capitation? What is the, let's say, the census data? But it gets a little bit deeper than just merely census data, as we're going to be talking about today. So whether this is good or bad, if they have an intention to a good thing and they want to utilize the capitation of humans and their ability to produce and to work as a measure of what a country has as an asset to provide special drawing rights of the international funny money system. So you think, well, they've got to base it on something and it's all for the good. And is it really? So what we're going to do is we're going to analyze this big blob that is extra constitutional. It is extra governmental. It is not voted in by you, but it intends to completely control you and to absorb you. And so I was thinking about these special drawing rights today, and I read about these things 20 years ago, and that's when I realized that, oh my goodness, you are the capital. You are the substance. You are the thing that backs the currency, and your habits are the thing. And the score, in like even as you've hearing in the news recently about these social score. If you go to a digital currency, and depending on your attitudes, you get certain, let's say, they call it rights to money or to the monetary system so that you can expend this money stuff to buy things, food, automobiles, houses, vacations, give to charities. So all of these things will, we're hearing it coming, will be based upon your, let's say, your benefit to society, your mental benefit to society, your productivity, and all the little aspects. The fruit of your soul will be measured as a element of the thing that supports the international money system, loaning to your country in order to enable it to perform its functions. Now, we're going to step back a little bit. I'm going to give you a little anecdote, a little sideline here of my observation. It was, I think it was 2000, right about 2009 or 10, I think it was 2009, where the International Monetary Fund came out with a plan that they announced that said, oh, we're going to look at countries without them asking for a loan, without them coming to us and asking for our input. We're going to look into the horizon and see if we can see any countries that we think are at risk financially. And we're going to send them a message and say, hey, country, let's say hypothetically Ireland, dear Ireland, we are sitting back and watching you. We've observed that your country probably is about ready to need a loan. And so we're going to set aside these special drawing rights for you. I know you haven't applied for them, but we're going to set them aside for you because we think that you're at risk. And I was going, whoa, wait a minute. The IMF has just found, that's the International Monetary Fund, has just found a new way to completely collapse a country, to have a run on their banks, to have an undermine. Actually, it could stimulate a coup. It could create, let's just say, all hell will break loose if they announce to this country, hey, we think you're in financial jeopardy. Because as soon as they do that, they're going to be in financial jeopardy. If the word gets out that the IMF has analyzed them like a bank examiner and has said, whoa, you guys got a little shaky business going on here. You realize these countries aren't just like living off of taxes. They're sadly, they're performing all their functions by borrowing money and paying a certain interest rate. And if they're at risk, their interest rate is higher. So that means they have to pay more interest, which means that the tax money that they bring in they pays for less services, or they have to raise the taxes. So it ultimately, this big blob's little committee somewhere in the IMF and their thinking process trickles down to you, the person who is being coerced into paying more taxes and getting less services. And then the cost of everything in your community is going up. And so I said on the radio, and I predicted that somebody's going to get thrown under the bus. Even if they try to keep it confidential, only communicate to their Treasury Secretary. The word's going to, in fact, if they even if they don't promise it, but somebody leaks a story or makes up a story and sends it to the local newspaper, and this thing gets out, it's going to create havoc. Guess what happened? And I said, hypothetically, Ireland. That's exactly what happened. It got published in the Telegraph that the IMF intended to provide a loan opportunity where it wasn't needed. It changed the government of Ireland. All of a sudden, people thought that their retirement system was going to go broke. And it changed the government of Ireland. So what I want to do is I want to step back today. Now, nobody's telling you this. This is so important stuff, and you're not hearing it on the mainstream mania. So you're hearing it here because this is Nuga Radio, and this is going to be a little Shangri-La of freedom and liberty. In between these hills, amongst these hills, in this little valley, it's going to be a Shangri-La of reality. And there's going to be an antidote to the pandemic of dementia. And you're not going to be succumbing to these things. You're going to have your own little fire extinguisher to chase away the blob that's rolling along, absorbing everybody, notwithstanding the rule book, notwithstanding their arms and their weapons of war and all the things upon which they consider they have some protection. So we're going to be talking about these things. We're coming back, and we're going to get a little more details so you can see what this really looks like. And we're going to compare that to the rule book. We're going to compare that to the Statement of Freedom, the covenant between the people of Tennessee that have put in stone those rules that will help their peace, happiness, and safety. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. So that's going out on the air. That's going to go out on the air. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to regroup for about a minute here and get my my article up that I was going to read here that has the special this actual thing from the United Nations. And then I've got to do another 15 minutes. And so here we go. I'm going to skip ahead. So we've got a 2-minute break that I'm going to skip ahead. So you're going to hear a little silence and then some music, and I'm coming back. Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael back with Preservative Talk Radio, producing a Shangri-La for Tennessee. For southeastern Tennessee is going to be the Shangri-La of freedom. That's why we're here. That's why we're here at Nuga Radio, as a loving way to minister to our neighbor, to stimulate your economy. Because if you know what, when I say things, things come out of my mouth and it makes me think of things. It's the weirdest thing. It just hit me that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. That there is a cause and effect to your prosperity. Doing the right thing will bear fruit of prosperity. There is a cause and effect. And if you do the wrong thing, it will reap consequences. And I don't know if you realize this, but things are going from order to chaos as a matter of nature. And if you just idly sit back and inject no energy, the blob's coming your way and it's not going to be held back. It's just going to roll right on over you and suck you up. There's something that you need to do. Like Steve McQueen, you're going to stand up and you're going to stand against the blob with your little fire extinguisher, and you're going to stand against it. So it's going to take some energy because we're in a fallen world. And if you just sit idly by, the law of entropy is going to just take things from ordered energy into chaos, and it's going to be contrary to your benefit. So that's why we're approaching these things today, to give you an understanding of the blob. To be able to announce to you that it's time to wake up, that the blob is rolling through, it's invaded your land, and it's growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And as I talked about just moments ago, there's one element, one indicator of Mr. Blob, and this is this international monetary system that has converted money and tangible things such as cash that would be related to gold, and then as a relationship to gold, using actual tangible value silver as a representative of actual gold, instead of using that something that has true intrinsic value. Our monetary system globally since 1973 has shifted into something else. It's based on something. It's not merely out of thin air. Even though people say, well, they just go onto an Excel spreadsheet and they crank some numbers and they keep track of the numbers that they put into the Excel spreadsheet, and that's our monetary system. Turns out they're actually basing it on something, and that something is you, is your flesh, is your body. That how they loan the reserve currencies of the Chinese and the United States and UK and Japan, and there's another one in there, that there's these 5 global currencies that are a pool of currencies that they give countries, the little guys, an opportunity to borrow money to keep themselves afloat based on special drawing rights. And I got more information 10 years ago than you can get now. As I do a search on it, it's very limited, it's very broad. But so what's the problem with that? Well, it turns out it's, in the U.S. Constitution, we have this thing about a census. Happens every 10 years. It's for the purpose of seeing how much representation you have. It's not to see whether or not you can get health care or whether you can get money to borrow or to give away or to get paid or to perform to go to church or to do anything. It's the purpose of the census is to figure out how many people are going to represent you in the institution of the well-ordered government that represents you, that you're the master and they're the servant. That's the census of the United States. And I'm going to come back to that because there's these forms that they send you, and it turns out one is the census. It's constitutional, happens every 10 years, only has a couple of questions. And you don't have to be the person who answers it, actually. And then there's this other form you're getting in the mail that comes down to you that has nothing to do with the census, but is a completely separate thing. It is not on the constitutional government, and it's asking you questions personally. It's directed personally because it's a social welfare benefit that you are supposed to answer under the penalty of, there's a penalty out there. If you don't answer it, supposedly there's a penalty. I don't think it's ever been enforced. But it comes to you directly. Nobody else is allowed to answer it. And the two things are completely different. The 5-year letter is part of the Blob. The 10-year letter is part of the constitutional government. And I'm going to come back to that later because y'all know what I'm talking about. You've gotten the mail and you've wondered whether you're supposed to fill out all that information or not. It relates to these special drawing rights. So I'm going to be connecting some dots here, but just keep that little census thing and the questionnaire that comes every 5 years in mind, because I'm going to give you some information ultimately that you're going to be thinking about which form you would like to answer. But we're coming down back to this special drawing rights. So the special drawing rights is you are the gold. You are. You and your children are the gold. So we're gonna change, let's say our tempo a little bit here. Again, we're gonna be checking this against the Tennessee Constitution, and we're gonna see whether it's if it jives with it or not. Is it legit? Is it something that is a minister to you, or is it a minister to somebody else, or something else that comes as an angel of light, but doesn't necessarily have your best interest in mind? It's a blob. It's rolling in order to grow and to absorb your energy, is what it is. So the blob is coming. Maybe I can find some music that relates to the blob. So that's special drawing rights. The gold is you. Okay, good to know. We got that now. Special drawing rights. This system of whether you've got points that you can borrow money to take care of your health, welfare, and other needs that the government has. That's the gold. That the part of the data that substantiates whether they should have rights to loan is what resources they have that they've got title to. Do they have title to mining interest? Do they have title to petroleum interest? Do they have title to people? What are the numbered heads? What are all their points? And how much in the big scheme of global currency sharing can they support a payment to pay the interest or whatever it is? So that's special drawing rights. Now let's go back to something else. As I was studying that, something else hit me. And I began to think about how do they, let's say, establish numbered heads. And we've got a certain situation you're going to hear about. As you know, I actually am doing things to solve some of these problems. I solve them for myself. I solve them for my family. And they're establishing fundamental freedoms. They're resetting things for me and my family because we're getting ready as the days are becoming more and more evil. we're preparing ourselves to be able to just live in righteousness, notwithstanding the encroaching blob. So I'm actually, it's, as I've said, we've got a case in the United States District Court that they're winning. We are winning well enough to this third motion for dismissal is on the basis of, hey, court, he's already won enough. His case is now moot. Please make him go away. That's the stage that our case is at. And you'll periodically be hearing about that. But there's other things that are related to the case that we're suing in the United States that relate to it. And so my goal is to equip the listener to see the macro, the blob, and it's rolling in, and then look at the micro and to figure out right where your rubber off your shoes hits the road, how does it affect you? And what is it that you can do differently? Which step can you take that will scare away the blob? That's where we're going. So as I was looking at how do you basically make gold, proverbial gold or figurative gold, fiat gold, out of numbered heads, that's us. And part of that is registration at birth. Registration at birth. But Brother David, what's wrong with a birth certificate? Well, I think in the big scheme of things, my natural mind, uneducated, goes, not a big deal. However, what you're going to see is what happened when I deliberately did not tell the hospital my daughter's name, and therefore a birth certificate can't be produced. And now when she goes to get a passport, how the little monster has reared its head, how the monster can't help itself but to try to coerce us to register her after the fact even for a birth certificate when it's not even required as a matter of law. It's not as required as a matter of a passport. Where you were born matters, and we have appropriate common law evidence to show where the young lady was born, and that is sufficient for the silly passport. However, because it turns out that I'm discovering that some of this paperwork is not just about health. Yeah, it is. It's about health and vital statistics. You're going to find out that there's a global plan for vital statistic registration, in which many of you have known and seen and heard, is that your children are enumerated at birth. There's an enumeration at birth program, and it is agenda. They used to call it Agenda 21. Now it turns out they've got an agenda that's 2030 to make sure everybody on the planet is registered, that your head is particularly numbered, and it's connected to these special drawing rights and a big scheme, a plan of action, a blob that's rolling in that is kind of like it's so big it doesn't matter. Your constitution is not an obstacle to it. Just like the blob in the movie, buildings were not an obstacle to it. The only thing that was an obstacle to it was an upstart Steve McQueen and his date, Helen Crump, can't remember the actress's name, I apologize, but standing up against the blob with their little fire extinguisher, right? The little person can do something and can keep the blob off their toes. But we need to know what the blob's doing. We need to know its mode of operation so we can know what the tools we need to use to keep it back from absorbing us. So when we're going to come back here in a minute, we're going to read something from the United Nations that is explained. And again, you need to know about this, and you haven't heard about it yet, except for right here, Preservative Talk Radio. And so I'm going to read from a document from the United Nations that explains their plan. And we're going to explain how encompassing it is and how fast this thing is rolling and what is it that might be an obstacle to it. And then we're going to come back to the Tennessee Constitution. And we're going to consider what we as a people have covenanted together for the protection of our peace, safety, and happiness. Stay tuned. So that's part number 2. I've got to kind of get things in order here. We're going to have just a few minutes of silence, and then I'm going to actually advance our silence. And now we're going to go to one more segment of our Preservative Talk Radio, and you're going to hear about it. So this is part of a series, an educational series to our radio audience. Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael, back with Preservative Talk Radio, engaging the issues of the day and the monsters of the day from a constitutional basis, a biblical basis, and the basis of right versus wrong. We celebrated the Tennessee Constitution. We read the Article 1 section of the first 2 paragraphs, and they were wonderful. They talked about that all power was inherent in the people, and that the people are the ones with the authority, and we institute a plan, a rule book to play this game of life, and we do it for our peace, happiness, and safety. And there's other things we're going to talk about. We're going to go through this systematically throughout Preservative Talk Radio, going to the various articles of initially the Bill of Rights. But what's it matter? What does it matter if in your nice, happy, all-American Midwestern town, the Blob has come in to invade and is growing and is rolling your way? What good is the Constitution if it's not going to be an obstacle to the Blob that's rolling your way? So let me describe to you the Blob so we can figure out what it is that we need to do to keep the Blob from absorbing us, from consuming our soul and our family soul. So I'm going to this United Nations thing I punched up today, and it's this civil registration program. Let me back up. I'm going to see what it says at the top of this page. Let's see, there's 4 of those that I go up. Evaluation of approaches to strengthen civil registration vital statistics systems. So actually what got me here is I saw something called PRISMA. And PRISMA, and it had the UN's United Nations PRISMA. I'm still trying to figure out what PRISMA is, and it's the only thing I could find is this system of getting statistics, of gathering information. It's called PRISMA. So I'll probably be learning more about that, but I'm going to have to dig a little bit more. It's a bit abstract, and we don't know the full distance and the strength of the tentacles of this PRISMA system. But it took me to this place where the UN has got a civil registration system. So I'm going to read some stuff from this UN document. Civil registration is defined as the continuous, permanent, compulsory, and universal recording of the occurrence and characteristics of vital events in accordance with the legal requirements in each nation. What are they talking about? Talking about double truth speak. What is that? Civil registration is continuous. It's got to happen all the time. Forever, it's stuck. Even though you might have a XY chromosome and want to tell everybody you feel like an XX chromosome, and they're going to bow to your request, this particular thing that's coming external and is not natural nor permanent is going to be considered permanent. It's going to be compulsory. How do you make something how does the United Nations make something compulsory? So this blob has every intention of coming to you in a compulsory fashion. It's been happening. And it's going to be universal recording of the occurrence and characteristics of vital events. So this is the vital event they're talking about is your existence. Your existence. So vital events captured in civil registration and vital statistics systems, the CRVS, include the registration of births, deaths, marriages, adoptions, divorces. Now, just what we're going to end up coming back to is you're going to see the clutches of this thing. And in the statutes, it's actually going to be associated with literally the number 666. Literally. In United States law. It's going to be really weird. Continuing. Civil registration supporting legal documentation provide individuals with proof of legal identity. It provides. Now, I don't mind if it can be used for evidence of legal identity, among other things, so that you could exclude this particular method, depending on your wishes. But here's your proof of legal identity. Now, here's another thing. This is the Blob, and we're going to have to contrast this to the Tennessee Constitution. Help establish their right to acquire nationality. So this UN system establishes your right to nationality, allows you to exercise a broad range of rights, and facilitate access to essential services. This UN program, this Blob, is going to enable you to get access to essential services, including social welfare, education, health, and legal protection. So by implication, guess what you don't have if you do not get consumed by this Blob? Social welfare, education, health, legal protection. So systematic compilation of civil registration data into vital statistics also provides the demographic information necessary for good governance. So I'm going to go on and skip a little bit to the highlighted areas. So birth and death registration data are also essential to inform health service needs and coverage. These functions are critical to monitoring progress in achieving, here's what the Blob intends to do. It sounds really nice. I thought, if you remember the Blob movie, it was kind of a cool little, ball of dough looking thing. But this is what their intentions are. These functions are critical to monitoring progress in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's sustainable development. But the details are that it's a blob and it's rolling your way and it intends to suck you up. But spoiler, there's a tool that you can use to keep back the rolling tide of the Blob. There's a way to protect yourself and to retain your individuality and to be able to do all these things, health, inheritance, legal protection. They're even saying that your inheritance is going to be based on this. There's things that you can do that I do that I'm going to be able to share with you without a fee so that you can stem back this Blob and not get all these things that ought to be your rights and not mere privileges or benefits. Those things that ought to be your rights to be able to protect them. So in the CRVS, this vital statistics data system, they say that household surveys have become a key source of data to monitor levels and trends in births, deaths, and other core population indicators. That's the thing they send you every 5 years. It's a questionnaire, and if I may be able to do a show on this where I get into the details and read the details of this thing, where they're going to have to ask you specifically your personal stuff, and it's all because you're no longer a person with rights, a person who is one of the people who established the republic, and that there is a census every 10 years to establish those people you send as your delegate to make laws. It becomes now a survey where you are a subject and a beneficiary that is obtaining your sustenance by the whims of whoever the committee is in charge. There's a complete difference. It becomes a master or a slave. A master or a slave. You know that slavery in the United States is voluntary. Still exists. But it's voluntary. Involuntary servitude is the only thing that was made illegal. Okay, so I'm going to continue on here. Global guidelines are useful in establishing these statistics, norms, and standards for countries. And this is what their intention is. The United Nations provides comprehensive guidance on how these systems can achieve universal coverage. This is a big Blob, baby. Continuity, confidentiality. Wait a minute. They're sharing information. That is a complete opposite of the word confidentiality. By its very nature, in this Prisma or whatever it is going to share information that's frankly none of their business. So here we go. And then give dissemination. And here's the bottom line here. All countries agreed to achieve the SDGs, the goals of Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. All countries agreed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals that specify targets related to these civil registration vital statistics, including by 2030 to provide legal identity for all, including birth registration, by 2020, enhance capacity building support to developing countries to increase significantly the availability of high quality and timely, reliable, disaggregated data, la, 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 la. It's a huge document. I'm on page 4 of 31 of this, and I just started on page 4 of 31. So I've just given you excerpts out of one page of 31 pages of single space, blah, 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 blah. Now, why does this matter? That's stepping back. These are details about a blob that is, and you go, why? What's the big deal? I got a birth certificate, and I can't get a passport without it. In fact, they enumerated me at birth, or my parents signed me up. There's nothing I can do about it. And so everywhere I go, even though it's not a benefit of Social Security, I use this number as my passport to survival, to get a bank account. When I go to the hospital, they ask me for it. If I want a job, they ask me for it. If they, it's just something we do. Well, it's the blob, folks. It's the blob. There's a difference. It's completely extra-governmental. And it turns out, this is just my experience, and if you go, it wasn't like this 20, 25 years ago, because I'd go to the doctor and they say, give us this number, you're not getting help. I go to different government agencies, give us this number, you're getting help. And there's a point where I actually, for myself and my family, said no. And some of that stuff has dissipated. My saying no was like a fire extinguisher against the blob. Now you got to see the movie. By the way, all the scary sounds, whoa, that was all arranged by Ralph Carmichael under a pseudonym. I'm David Allen Carmichael. Yes, we're related. So it's appropriate to bring up the blob here. But there's things that we can do to reclaim our identity as men and women created in the image of God with inherent rights. Man, that's causing me to go back to the Tennessee Constitution here. That all power is inherent in the people. And all free, that's not slavish or enslaved governments, are founded on the people's authority. Men and women created in the image of God's authority. These governments are instituted for our peace, safety, and happiness. Not to be consumed, not to be part of the special drawing rights of powers, but instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness, for the advancement of those ends. That's us, the people, have at all times an unalienable, indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as we think proper. It's going to take a little work. We're going to have to get a great big fire extinguisher to take care of the bigger problems. But for me and thee, there's things that we can do by faith, trusting in God as our provider, and ministering to one another, loving our neighbor as ourselves, encouraging one another in love and good works. Those are the antidote to this coming infection, this coming blob that's rolling our way. They are the fire extinguisher to hold back the encroaching monster. Thank you for tuning in, staying with me. Share this with your friends. That's probably the thing to do, because I don't have the capacity to get the word out or the substance of this conversation. So appreciate your tuning in. Share, like, do whatever you're going to do. You can forward it to other people. And I encourage you, if you have any questions or comments, you can look me up on the internet and communicate to me. And I don't know whether I'm going to give out my phone number yet. But if you can make comments on some of the things, we're going to put it on Rumble. We're going to put it on YouTube. And if you want to make a comment there and you want to have some communication from me, I'll read the comments and I'll have an opportunity to give you some direct communication. That's it. God bless you. As I'm looking for the off button for my streaming software.